Well, in chapter 21, we're going to be elaborating on animal bodies a little bit. We're going to be talking about some of the specialized structures that animals have. And we're going to start right off by introducing a couple of terms, anatomy and physiology. When we use the word anatomy, this is just referring to the structure that an organism has, and each animal has different body parts, and the arrangement of those body parts is what anatomy is all about studying. Physiology, on the other hand, is more focused on studying the function of those parts, how those different structures do what they do, how do they function. That's physiology. So we'll be focused a little bit on both, actually, in this chapter. We're going to introduce some of the key foundations that we see in the animal world. So hierarchy, in terms of just animal bodies, how are things arranged? What's the organization? We know a lot about cells. We spent a whole chapter 4, learning about cells and the different structures inside, organelles. In animals, it turns out cells rarely act alone. Usually cells work as a team. They work together with each other. So cells ordinarily, in animal bodies, cells would be arranged into what we would call tissues. So that's our first level of hierarchy. Cells group together to form tissues, and then we'll define a tissue in just a minute. Those tissues can group together to form organs. So organs, examples of organs would be things like the heart. The heart is an organ. The liver is an organ. Your skin actually is an organ. So we have many different organs, and organs often work together as part of a larger system. So an example of this, we could talk about the digestive system. That would include the stomach, but it would also include the intestines and a number of other things. Right? So organs can work together in order to accomplish a specific sort of overall task, goal. And then finally, organ systems work together to make up the entire body of an organism. So in humans, we have 11 major organ systems. We'll talk about, we'll give some examples of some organ systems a little bit later on. But organ systems are the highest level of organization that we typically talk about within an organism's body. So we will be starting this chapter. We're going to start off introducing some information about tissues. So cells group together to form tissues. We have 4 major tissue types in our bodies. Animals do. And tissues, the thing that really characterizes a tissue is that all of the cells that are present in that tissue, they're all sort of performing a specific function together. They're working together to do one specific function. So we'll see some examples of this as we go, but the 4 major categories of tissues include, they're listed out on the slide here, epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. So some of this you might already be familiar with. You might already kind of have an inkling of what do these tissues do, like muscle tissue, that allows us to move. But some of these others might be perhaps new ideas for you. So we're going to start at the top of the list, epithelial tissue. What I would like for you to know about epithelial tissue is that it covers surfaces. And we could be talking about a surface that's on the outside of the body. So for example, skin. Skin is an example of epithelial tissue. But we also have surfaces internally. All of our organs have a surface. All of our body cavities are lined with a surface. Just internally, we don't ordinarily see these surfaces. They're hidden away. But in either case, whether we see it or not, it's epithelial tissue is what is lining those spaces. So let's look at 2 examples. Skin. Okay, skin is the one that we can see, right? It's on the outside of the body. Skin is made of a structure that looks like this. It's got many cells that are very tightly packed together. And with all tissues actually, there is a very tight relationship between structure and function. So if you think about your skin, what is the function of your skin? In large part, it's providing a boundary between you and the outside world. So it needs to be a good barrier. It needs to prevent a lot of things from being able to cross. And the structure, the fact that these cells are so tightly packed together, This really helps to keep things out. This provides some waterproofing to the skin. A lot of these cells are packed with keratin, which is a water-resistant material. So this helps to keep water out. Why is that important? Well, think back to osmosis and diffusion, right? If this was permeable to water, then what would happen? Water would just, every time we got in the shower or something, water would flow into our cells, and that would cause a problem. So it's important to have that waterproof layer on the outside of the body. Moving inside of the body, let's consider an example inside. So we've got our whole cardiovascular system, right? Heart and blood vessels, which are coming up in I think that's going to be in our last chapter together. Anyway, general idea, heart and blood vessels. This allows blood to be pumped throughout the body. And all of those blood vessels have a lining on the inside. The capillaries are the smallest blood vessels that we have, and capillaries are sites where gas exchange can happen. So remember, all of our cells are producing carbon dioxide waste just from cellular respiration. That waste has to go somewhere. It needs to not stay with the cell. So what happens is the carbon dioxide waste, it diffuses from our cells out into a capillary, into the blood. And so the capillary walls need to actually be a little bit permeable. They need to let waste products, carbon dioxide is one waste product. We make other waste products as well. Some of them are larger molecules. And the lining of capillaries is a little bit leaky. There are some gaps between the cells, and that allows these waste products to move into the capillary. It allows nutrients to move out of the capillaries and diffuse over to the cells. So there's this very intentional exchange that can happen between capillaries and surrounding cells. So that's quite a different structure, right, compared to what we just went through with the skin. Very tight packed cells, versus in capillaries we've got very leaky connections between cells. Either way though, you can see there's a very strong relationship between structure and function. And that was one of our overall themes in biology, is structure-function relationships are key pretty much everywhere we look. So these are a couple of examples of epithelial tissues. A couple of other interesting notes about epithelial tissues. The fact that epithelial tissues are exposed to a lot of sort of abrasions. Think about your skin. Think about how often you brush up against things. Maybe you bump into a wall. So those cells, they're exposed to quite a bit of abrasions throughout their lifetime. And as a result of that, it's important for these cells to be replaced pretty frequently. So in general, epithelial tissues, they have a high rate of cell turnover, a high replacement rate. These cells undergo mitosis pretty often, actually, compared to other types of cells in the body. So just due to the fact that they divide a lot, this means that if cancer is going to happen, a lot of times it ends up being in epithelial tissue, just because that's where replication is taking place, and mistakes occasionally happen during replication. So many of the familiar cancers are actually cancers of epithelial tissue. Some examples of that would include breast cancer, epithelial tissue that's an inside surface of the breast, prostate cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer. The colon, this is the large intestine, that's part of the digestive tract, and sort of same idea internally. If we eat food, that food is going to slide through the digestive tract. It's kind of abrasive as it goes. So again, these cells have a high turnover rate. Colon cancer is one type of epithelial cancer that occurs in epithelial tissue. Skin cancers as well. Skin cancers are the most visible. If a skin cancer develops, it's usually noticeable just as a change in appearance. Maybe it was a mole that started to look larger or change color, and so that's a type of cancer that often can be recognized if you are paying attention to your skin, which you should periodically, like once a month. Just kind of take a look, see if anything seems like it's changing. That would be something to go have a doctor check, because again, epithelial tissue is a little bit more prone to cancers developing. So all of these cancers are called carcinomas. This is just a way to refer to cancer of an epithelial tissue.